Good evening, everyone. We're just going to give it just another second or so to be sure that everyone has been let into the space from our waiting room. Thank you for being with us. Okay. Looks like we have everyone in the space. Again, thank you for being with us this evening. My name is Yolanda Jones. I am the Senior Project Manager for Community Outreach for Planning, and I'm joined by other members of the planning staff as well. Today's topic, or this evening's topic, will be on short-term whole dwell rentals. So the listening sessions that we have scheduled over the past several weeks and in the upcoming weeks are on topics that have garnered a lot of interest, a lot of feedback and comments, and we just decided to do some deeper dives into those and hear from you all. These sessions are a chance for you as the community to voice your opinions about the standards within this first draft of the UDO. They're designed as an additional avenue to submit feedback, because you can submit feedback through our comment portal, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as well later in the presentation. The goal of these sessions is for staff to hear your feedback, suggestions, and concerns. And please note that the emphasis during these presentations or during these sessions, these listening sessions, is on listening versus responding. Questions and comments shared during these sessions will be transcribed and entered into our comment portal for response after the close of each session. So I'll quickly go over a few guidelines for this evening's meeting. Those who had signed up to speak during the meeting while you were registering for this actual session, you'll be called upon in the order for which you registered. Each speaker has the floor for 90 seconds. And please note that once you are called upon to speak, you will receive a notice from the meeting host to ask yourself to unmute. And to maintain fairness, once you have met that 90 seconds and it has expired, we will mute you to move on to the next person. Those who did not sign up to speak but wish to speak, you can add your name to our chat, and then we will put you in a queue. Time permitting, we will allow those folks who sign up to speak in the queue to speak as well. Once the queue is cleared, if we do have additional time, we will allow those folks that unfortunately I have to cut off to extend or complete your thoughts. There will be a time limit to that as well, according to the time that we have left in the session. We encourage attendees to share your opinions in a civil and honest manner. And again, the emphasis tonight is going to be on listening versus responding. Here you'll see a few key dates about the UDO process. The first draft of the UDO was released on October 7th, and during that process, we have collected community comments. Those will be open until March 18th. So it's really important that you document that date. Again, March 18th will be the final day for collecting public comments on the first draft. And once we've collected those comments on the first draft, our team will go back, work through those comments and create a red line draft of the UDO. That is our second draft, and it's scheduled to come out in May. So we'll use those comments to make that second draft available for you in May. We will then go to the City Council, you will as the public, to have a public hearing in June. And then the Planning Committee recommendation will happen as well, with a hopeful adoption for the UDO in July of 2022. So just a quick outline or roadmap of this session for this evening. We will hear about the proposed approach for regulating short-term rentals in this first draft presented by Kevin May, project coordinator, planning project coordinator. Ooh, that was a tongue twister, for Entitlement Services Division. We'll then open the floor for our community feedback forum. And then we'll close by highlighting some UDO resources and some of our upcoming engagement opportunities for you to be able to sign up for as well. So now I'll go ahead and turn it over to Kevin.
Thank you, Yolanda. I appreciate it. Good evening, everybody. Kevin May, Planning Project Coordinator on the UDO team. I'm going to provide to you a little bit of background information, as well as some very high-level highlights with regard to the current draft approach to regulating short-term rentals. Some of you may be very familiar with those standards already. To provide you a little bit of background, some of you may know we currently have a zoning ordinance in the city, and because the Gig economy, short-term rentals are relatively new activity. Our current zoning ordinance really does not speak to it, and so it lacks clarity in that current zoning ordinance for that activity and land use. According to one source, as you can see referenced here, the city currently has about 3,000 property listings for this type of activity. And over time, the various multiple city departments and the Charlotte City Council have received concerns about the effects of this use in established neighborhoods. And you can see some of what those concerns have touched on is the clustering or oversaturation of this use in neighborhoods, some venues being used for parties and events. And then depending on the volume at these venues, they can certainly bring about accompanying parking, noise, or trash issues. Excuse me. Because of those various or those concerns received by various departments in the council over time, the Charlotte City Council actually had occasion during a Great Neighborhoods Committee meeting to discuss the issue of short-term rentals in October 2020. Now, mind you, we've been working on the UDO for quite some time now, and that meeting of the Great Neighborhoods Committee in October 2020 was also occurring at the same time that staff was already working on drafting potential regulatory language and standards to address that gap, that lack of clarity I was referring to in the current zoning ordinance. As a result of the Great Neighborhoods Committee, council at that time did not give staff any direct action item, but coming out of that, staff did continue its efforts that it already had started to create that clarity and propose a draft definition and a draft set of standards. And that kind of brings us to the topic of this evening's conversation, which is those proposed standards and that proposed definition. As you can see here, the current proposed definition for short-term whole dwelling rental is a complete dwelling offered for rent for a period of less than 30 consecutive days. It's currently classified as a commercial use in the first draft of the UDO, and it would be allowed with prescribed conditions in all zoning districts except for the handful that you see there on the screen. Additionally, and I just touched on this, it would be allowed with prescribed conditions. Those prescribed conditions are about almost a dozen standards that you may have seen or be familiar with in the current draft of the UDO. You can see there by reference if you happen to go back to the UDO where you can find these proposed standards. But I wanted to key in on about 6 of them, which is really, as Yolanda said, has garnered a lot of activity and feedback from the community on what we're hearing about those proposed standards. And the first is who can obtain a zoning permit, because part of the standards is that this would require a zoning use permit. Also, I want to say, I'm probably not going too far out on a limb here, that probably the provision that has garnered the most attention and feedback is the proposed separation requirements. Some of you may know that is the 400-foot provision. Other pieces of those prescribed conditions that are generating a lot of feedback are the provisions for local managers in liability insurance. And then lastly, there have been some feedback received with regard to off-street parking requirements for this type of activity, as well as the proposed requirement for conspicuous posting of certain required information. That is solely just based on what the draft UDO currently has for proposed standards. I will say that staff, because this has garnered a lot of feedback, is also hearing other concerns, and you can see them here. Some of those other concerns are how to go about administering or treating existing properties with this type of activity and use versus ones that may become new short-term rental offerings. And then also, well, what about if I only rent part of my house as opposed to the current slate of proposed standards, which really address whole dwelling rentals? So those are a couple of the other pieces and those other concerns and other feedback that we as a UDO team are hearing. There's 2 things that I want to stress. And the first is that all of the currently proposed prescribed conditions are going to be thoroughly re-examined. Nothing is set in stone. So just because it's in that first draft of the UDO, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what will carry forward through a second draft or perhaps even through to council. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is that's really kind of building off that first point is that's really why we're here and engaging with this discussion and this listening session with you all this evening is we want to hear what you guys have to say. We want to hear what your opinions, your feedback, your concerns are with regard to these proposed regulations, because we want to take that into consideration as staff re-examines this for future iterations of what these draft standards will look like, either through or going forward through the second draft or the public hearing to council. So it's very important, and I very much am appreciative of everybody who's taken the time to be here to provide your perspective through your lens on these current standards. And I think that wraps it up for me. And so with that, I will turn it back over to our moderator, Yolanda, to open the open forum.
Thank you, Kevin. Prior to opening the forum, what I'd like to do is we do have a couple of folks who are dialed in with us via phone. So in order to be able to be sure for fairness, we want to be sure that you are heard if you are asked to speak and you've dialed in by phone. You will receive, once I call out the last four of your phone number, you'll receive a request from the meeting host to unmute. You should press *6. And if you could just give us your name, that way we can be sure to document that for the record. So the first number ends in 3391. You should be receiving a request to *6 and share your name, please. It's 3391.
Oh, hello.
Hi. Could
Hi.
you?
Yeah. Yes. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Iris E.
Okay, Iris, if you'll just give me, before you speak, Iris, if we can just document you, we do have you on the list. Thank you for letting us know. I'll call you in the order for which you registered. We just didn't know because of your phone number, your name. So I'll be right back around to you, I promise. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And then the next phone number is 5489. You should be receiving a request. Please press *6 and share your name. Again, that's 5489.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, this is Chris. Yes, my name is Christy Holcomb.
Christy Holcomb. Thank you very much, Christy.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So again, I'm going to quickly go over our guidelines. So each speaker will have 90 seconds. You will be called in the order for which you've registered for this meeting. And once you are called upon, you will receive a request from the meeting host to unmute. To maintain fairness, once your 90 seconds or your minute and 30 seconds has expired, we will mute you to move on to the next person. Those who did not sign up to speak during meeting registration but would like to speak now, you may enter your name into the chat to be added to a queue, and we will go through that queue once those speakers who pre-registered have spoken. If we do, and this again, time permitting, that we are going to be able to get through the queue, as well as allowing anyone who doesn't complete their thought to come back around and speak to complete their thought, and we'll give you maybe an additional minute or so to do that. So that's going to be the manner in which, and if you have any questions, you can enter those in the chat as well. I do want to point out prior to opening this forum that there will be no responses with potential changes. When I say responses, you can put your comments into our portal if you do not get to complete your thoughts here, if you think of something else that you'd like to add into our comment portal. However, if it is requesting a change within the UDO, please don't expect a response on that change prior to the next draft, only because that comment will then be taken into consideration for the next draft. However, if you're asking a clarifying question, or you're just trying to, thank you for that. If you are just trying to clarify something or get more information, we can definitely answer those questions. And you can put those in the portal as well. Those will be answered as we answer comments, and those come out periodically. So you can continue to check back at our website. All right, so we will get started. Our very first speaker of the evening is Ann Sargent.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, you can see. Thank you.
Okay. Appreciate this forum and understand the need for regulations. My biggest concern is the 400-foot separation. That's not going to solve the problem for residents that have disruptive Airbnbs next door. And further, it's going to directly hurt the good hosts who earn much needed income from Airbnb, myself included. I think these regulations would better serve both residents and hosts if the focus was placed more on removing the problem properties rather than blanket rules across the board. We have 2 homes in family-friendly neighborhoods, and I manage 1 other. We don't allow parties or gatherings of any sort. Any additional guests must be approved. We vet guests very carefully, have cameras outside, and have good relationships with the neighbors and have had no problems. And I think that 95% of hosts are similar. So again, I think the focus should be placed on removing the small percent of bad hosts that are giving the rest of us a bad name. Additionally, there should be something in place, grandfathering in existing Airbnbs. As we began our short-term rentals when no regulations were in place, we invested money into furnishing and making them short-term rentals under the laws at that time and should not be penalized later for it. At our Airbnbs, our guests are mostly families, many looking to relocate to the Charlotte area, others visiting family nearby. We've had local guests stay while their home was being renovated, guests in Charlotte working for multiple months, and they don't want to stay in a hotel. So there's a clear need for short-term rentals in Charlotte, and the 400-foot rule does not seem to fit the problem we're trying to solve.
Thank you, Anne, for your thought. The very next speaker that we have is Joe Quinn. Joe Quinn. Okay, Marjorie Parker. Marjorie Parker. Antoinette Bailey. Kate Lopiklo. Billy Graham. Billy Graham should be receiving a request from this host to unmute.
Yes, sorry.
Hi.
I was
No,
late
no
logging in.
problem at all. No problem. You have 1 minute and 30 seconds, and I'll go ahead and start there. Go ahead and speak. Thank you.
Oh, I literally just logged in, so I've missed a lot of it. So I'm going to pass on my time slot. Thank you.
And if you'd like, we can come back around. If you want to put your name in the chat, Mr. Graham, if you decide that you want to speak after you've heard a little more, you definitely can do that. We don't want to. Alrighty. Martin Zimmerman. Martin Zimmerman. Ava Weaver. Ava Weaver. Up, Ava, I see your hand. Mariah, if we can. I can see Ava. Sorry, just a second. Ask to unmute. Let's see if that works. Ava, are you getting a request from us to unmute? If you could type it in the chat, that'd help too. As we know you can't unmute to speak. Okay. It looks like we're having some difficulty. Ava will come back around to you if you'd like. Tiffany Malone. Tiffany Malone. Okay. Megan Hurt. Megan Hurt. Bill Stamos.
Hi,
Hi, hi, Bill. You can go ahead.
how you doing? I appreciate the opportunity to talk. And what my concern is, again, and it's been reiterated, the 400-foot rule and the grandfather clause is also, like the first speaker stated, that we invested heavily to begin this, and I have a few of them, a few Airbnbs. And with Airbnb, there's clauses and regulations where rules where you can't have any parties, and they'll actually cut your account. So that won't be an issue if you're on a Airbnb, VRBO, I believe so also. And that's what I wanted to state. And if the short-term rentals are listed and regulated even by the host company, then I think everything should be sufficed in keeping the neighborhood up to par, no parties, and the trash issue not being an issue, and everything that a neighborhood would be concerned of. But that's basically what my input would be on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stamos. Next up, Jamian Selman. Jamian Selman. Okay. Daniel Moats.
Yes. Hi,
Hi, Dan.
I appreciate the chance to talk. Just a couple of real quick points. I agree with a lot of what Ann said and the last gentleman that spoke. I do think that the grandfather clause should be something that needs to be considered again because we did invest heavily. I also think there should be some consideration given to addressing or regulating when problems arise, not just a blanket regulation on everybody that does this, right? Like a 3 strikeout, your rule, maybe the police have to get called more than once. I'm also in a unique situation where I have an Airbnb that I live on premises. So I feel like a lot of this stuff shouldn't apply to somebody like myself, where I shouldn't have to post my personal information on the side of my garage apartment when I live here. You know what I mean? There's no problems. And then just speaking to what the last gentleman said, I do disagree. I think there should be regulations put in place because just because Airbnb and VRBO are the flavor of the day, we don't know what kind of platforms may arise tomorrow. And so I don't want a city run amok with short-term rentals. There should be some regulations in place. I guess I want to try to find that fair balance between regulation and over-regulation. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moats. Next up, Anna Gregorovia. Anna.
Yes, I'm here.
Awesome.
Perfect. I mean, I am also a host on Airbnb and VRBO, a super host, and it's essentially, honestly, the same sentiment that everyone else relayed earlier, because we've never had issues on our 2 properties, and we have cameras actually with live guards, and so even when we're asleep, right, if an issue comes up, it's monitored by somebody who is monitoring these cameras 24/7 and is able to call the police, let's say, and not that it ever happened in the past. Also want to voice my support for the grandfather clause, right? Like, what are we going to do with the existing short-term rentals? And also, I wanted to find out if there's going to be a place to ask questions, because I'm not very clear on the property manager. Is that going to be just an owner, for example, or you have to have like a licensed property manager who's managing your properties? If you can provide any guidance, maybe after, right, for where we can find out answers to those questions, that would be great.
Thank you, Anna. And again, as you have questions, if you could add those to our portal, Mariah has dropped the link in our chat. You can add clarifying questions there and they can be responded to. Next up, we have Dan Johnson. Dan Johnson. Okay. David Worrell. David.
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you.
Awesome.
Let me pull up my notes real quick. So we live downtown, and there are a number of Airbnb properties nearby. And so I really wanted to respond to the reasons behind the new ordinance, namely that they're a nuisance, that the short-term rentals are a nuisance because they attract noisy parties or disrespectful guests. Once in a while, that's certainly true. There are groups who get out of control or who happen to be a little bit noisier than maybe they should be. But when that happens, we call the owner of the property or the property management company, and they take care of it immediately. In some cases, I've even seen them kick the guests out of the house in the middle of the night, send them packing. But what's more, this is happening less and less frequently because, as Anna Sargent said very clearly, the property owners are getting smarter about screening their guests to avoid potential unpleasantness and potential damage to their property. So I actually like having the Airbnbs where you can have an intermediary to call them. Compare that with the many private owners in our neighborhood. On any given weekend, those folks invite their friends over to celebrate a Panthers game or a work holiday or just the nice weather in town. And when that happens, the party lasts well into the early morning. We lay awake listening to our neighbors party in the driveway, in their living room, on the rooftop decks down here. And complaining is not only useless because there's nobody really to call other than the police, but it's also counterproductive to being a good neighbor. You risk the neighborly relationships and everything else.
Thank you, Mr. Worrell. Thank you.
Yep.
Our very next speaker is Iris Yee. And I think, Iris, you will have to hit the *6 to come unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you can go ahead and start. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so my first concern is about the 400 feet rule. I think this will not solve the problem, and it's very hard to implement it fairly. I agree with one previous speaker that we should focus on eliminating bad listing. We could have a feedback system like the point system for driver license. Like, for example, if you get complaints from neighbors or something from police department, you will lose some points. So if you lose like certain points, like we can eliminate, the bad Airbnb host and listing by doing that, not just like not allowing anyone to, just get an Airbnb listing. And I also agree the grandfather rule should be honored here. And my second concern is about the parking. As you know, in the uptown Noda South Park area, it's hard for a building to have off-street parking in the building. I think you should also allow them to use commercial garage. For example, if a commercial garage is within 5 minutes walk of the building of the listing, I think it also should be considered as the off-street parking. And the Airbnb host, they can communicate clearly with their guests, so the guests know where to park and they are not going to cause any problem for the neighborhood.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Our next speaker, Sam Mansing. Sam Mansing.
Yeah, hi. So in addition to some of the concerns that are already posted or mentioned here, my second other concern was, what qualifies as a complete dwelling, right? Many of my homes, I block off certain areas of the houses which are not accessible to the guest, even though the rest of the house is. So would that still qualify as a complete dwelling or not? So that's my concern here.
Thank you. Thank you, Sam. And as you, again, ask questions, we have dropped into the chat the link for where you can submit your questions and comments. The next speaker we have is David Hoffman. David Hoffman, Sarah Ambitious, Sarah Ambitious, Toya Ewing, Toya Ewing, Cecilia Shavi, Cecilia Shavi, Ivan Mothershead, Ivan Mothershead, Sandra Leggio, Sandra Leggio, Josh Holby, Josh Holby, Kenya Teague, Kenya Teague, Christopher Cato, Christopher Cato, Terry Trofelti, Terry Trofelti, Jamie Infanzon, Jamie Infanzon, Crystal Donald, Crystal Donald.
Yes, Crystal Donald here.
Hi, Crystal.
Hi, how are you? Yes, I am a host of short-term rentals and have been for the past 4 years. First thing, I just want to address the question regarding the local manager rule and your instructions to put on the portal. I just want to make sure that the answers to those questions will be available to everyone, regardless of who actually answered or asked the question. So I just wanted to put that up first. But to my point, I wanted to talk about the 400-foot rule to reiterate what many have already addressed. I believe that is just a blanket Band-Aid for a problem that really can be handled by uprooting those who are the bad apples. I, just like some of the other folks that have talked about, have shared this evening, have operated ethically and safely and profitably over the years. And I implement these rules and things to make sure that I have guests. I vet the guests, make sure we have copies of their IDs, that we go through the protocols of the platforms as well as directly. But I also include those neighbors, and we have monitoring systems, noise and cameras and such, to make sure that the guests are operating according to our house rules. And if they don't, they get kicked out. And so just by having blanket standards across the board, I think it will actually be detrimental not only to the community, but to also those of us who are hosts who are bringing in income and guests to the city. As far as the 30-day rule, we have a number of use cases where people are coming in and they don't want to stay at a hotel. People who are coming in for hurricanes, and other situations that become
Crystal,
maybe
I hate to cut you. I hate to cut you off. And looks like we will have time to come back around. So we will definitely add you back to complete your thought. But you'd reached your minute and 30 seconds. Anastasia Stashko. Anastasia Stashko.
Yes, good evening. Thank you.
Hi.
I definitely agree with everything that's been said, and I attended the call that was earlier today. So it sounds like the consensus is everyone definitely wants like the bad apples that are said to be the ones identified that are causing issues, and those are the ones that are not responsibly managing the properties. I guess one follow-up concern or thought I had was exactly how to identify those, and then I guess reporting it if there will be people. I'm sure everyone is ethical and means well, but what if some people are reporting people intentionally, like competitors reporting other hosts or neighbors, just reporting properties where there's really not a nuisance? Just trying to think of ways to make it equitable and really fair, to make sure that only problem properties are identified and verified for those complaints.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. And I just want to take a moment to stop for just a second to clarify some things. So yes, your questions and comments do need to go into the comment portal, and they are specific to the article for which you're speaking. Thank you, Kevin, for clarifying that. Zoning districts and standards on the portal is identified by Mariah. And if you look in the chat, that is where you should place those. I do want to answer that question because we want that to be clear. And additionally, I think Crystal, you brought up, they will be available for everyone to see. Public comments are public comments, and they will be published as such. So completely, just to share that tidbit. So hopefully that helps some of maybe the little bit of confusion it seems that was in the chat. We definitely want to hear from you guys. So. All righty, it looks like.
I'm sorry, Yolanda, if I could interject,
Sure,
just
please
piggybacking
do.
off that for just a second. As we, hey, everybody, I'm sorry. Just a voice from out of nowhere. This is Kevin again. Listen, as we wrap up and get through public comments, we'd also maybe, if you want to take a moment's pause and wait, there'll be some further information about how to enter those comments in the portal from some of the future slides, so we can kind of talk a little bit more with you on how to do that, as well as direct you to a tutorial. So if you want to just take a moment's pause and wait for us to finish public comments, it might become even more clear for you as we wrap the open forum. That's all I'd add. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. So it looks like we do have one person who has joined that we would have called earlier. Just want to wrap back around. Martin Zimmerman, Mr. Zimmerman.
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes, you have 1 minute and 30 seconds.
Yeah, I apologize. I came in late, so it's possible I may have overlooked some technicalities pertaining to the ordinance itself. But very briefly, the situation that I'm in is completely different from the other people. It's the College Downs neighborhood next to the university, where you have as many as 4 or 5 students living for 9 months in a house and absentee landlords. I'm not expecting an answer necessarily at this point in the conversation, but I did notice in what I assume is still in the ordinance is that the owner of the house has to live there. Again, I may have missed something in the discussion. Maybe that's changed in the time that since the time I first looked at the ordinance language. But it's quite a problem here with the students. And I don't think few people want students out of the neighborhood completely, but we really could use some very strong regulations on who lives there, how responsible the landlord should be, how long they should be there for, and whether landlords really need to be in the house. So I just want to get that out on the table. And thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zimmerman. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So it looks like we do have one additional phone number, and I just want to be sure, so that, again, for fairness, that if that person was one person that was scheduled to speak, the last 4 digits of that phone number are 3588. You should be receiving a request from the meeting host to press *6 and share your name. We just want to be sure, again, for fairness, that if you wanted to speak. 3588, additional phone number. You can press *6 now to unmute. Okay. The next phone number ends in 4270. Again, that's 4270. You should be receiving a request from the meeting host to press *6, unmute, and share your name. We again just want to be in fairness to be sure if these are folks who signed up to speak, we allow that. Okay, it looks like I have a hand from Ava. Ava, we're gonna try, I know we tried a little bit earlier to send you that request to unmute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. You have your minute and
Oh,
30 seconds.
fantastic. Okay, yes, I am very glad that, we're having this forum here because I represent, I would say, senior citizens. I've turned on quite a few senior citizens to the idea of an Airbnb. And basically with raising prices, grocery stores, and everything else involved, they have found it to be very helpful and quite an additive to their incomes. Let's see, what else? I'm kind of reading my notes here. Now, I myself, I've been doing it for 3 years. 2 of my close friends have been doing it for several years also. I'm also a realtor, and a short term stay has been very helpful for my clients that are closing on properties and need somewhere to move into already furnished until their property is either built or ready to move in, or they're closing. So we find short-term rentals very helpful, really, to the economy. Okay, so I'd like for that to be considered for the senior citizens that are making ends meet out here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ava. Our next speaker is Jack Williams. Jack Williams.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes. So I think as a coming from this as the opposite side of things, I think for most of the people here as someone who lives across from a couple Airbnbs, I think the grandfathering in existing Airbnbs just because we didn't have regulations before, I don't think that's any reason to grandfather in existing Airbnbs, especially when I think we've got a situation close to us where there's some gray areas in the existing regulations. I think that were kind of touched on a little bit earlier with accessory dwelling units and how those are treated when it comes to Airbnbs, short-term dwellings. And I think the other point, I'd like to bring up is someone earlier mentioned the owner occupied. I think that definitely should be something that's explored for someone that's living in that house and can more closely watch that. Should definitely be granted maybe either exemption from that 400-foot rule or some other breaks in that part of the process, since they're more vested in that community, and have to kind of experience what it's like to deal with short-term rentals, in your neighborhood. So that's my feedback. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. So it looks like we have gotten through the pre-registered speakers. Additionally, those folks who signed up in the queue to speak. So what I want to do is just to take a moment to go back to 2 of the speakers that I had to cut off. First up, David Worrell. We can give you another additional minute and 30 seconds just to complete your thought. I know that I had to cut you off, but because of time, we do have the ability to do that if you'd like to speak. David Worrell. Okay. And then Crystal Donald.
Hi, Yolanda, can you hear me?
Yes, I'll go ahead and give you another minute, 30 seconds, because I know I had to cut you off to try to finish your thought.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All I wanted to just add to what I said previously was that, there are many use cases on why people use short-term rentals that aren't just the vacationers, and they may need more than 30 days. For example, someone who had an insurance claim. These could be local folks who, you know, maybe there's roof damage or something in their home and they don't want to stay in a hotel, or they have a whole family with pets. This is just one example of literally hundreds that I can drop with you, that short-term rentals supply and need in the marketplace. And it's really about having ethically and safely monitoring these units. I myself, I actually teach students on how to have short-term rentals and how to actually have them where they're properly maintained and monitored, and that we're operating as good neighbors in the community, getting those folks on board. And if there's an issue, having them contact us rather than having to contact the police. We do also have operations managers who manage things on site, in addition to necessarily me or owners. And so there's a lot of different things that we can do that I think have not been explored. And I think that would be helpful and beneficial rather than just these blanket rules. I yield my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal. Okay. Just want to take one final glance to be sure that we have gotten everyone who wanted to speak. And please keep in mind, we will be saving the chat. So again, all of your comments, questions and concerns will be added to our queue. Okay, I think we just got Christy S. Christy?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, thank you so much.
You have 1 minute and 30 seconds.
Okay, so I'm just going to reiterate some of what we've already heard, that we support the grandfathering and have concern with the 400-foot rule. We own 2 Airbnbs. One is in a more transitional neighborhood, and we bring in professionals and traveling nurses and folks that actually are building the community up and bringing revenue to the city. So the other thing that hasn't been touched on yet that I wanted to touch on that is concerning to us in the UDO is the signage requirements, and the fact that we are afraid that posting that kind of information in a conspicuous spot is going to bring the potential for crime to our properties, because that it is going to red flag those properties as being short-term rentals that are fully furnished, and maybe targeted or either in vacant short-term rentals that are furnished, or that travelers are staying there, and might make our guests targets of crime. And so we're concerned about the extensive signage requirements. You know, a permit number or something like that being posted is one thing versus a manager's name and phone number, and, you know, all the information that's currently in the UDO that would have to be posted. But we do agree with the need for some regulation. We just would like to see, you know, you guys take a little more time to make sure you're addressing all these concerns that multiple people of us have.
Thank you. Ivan Grigorvia, Eva, I believe we had you logged in twice, so I apologize if that was we don't know which of you to unmute to speak, but we hope
Yes,
you will have the right.
my
Awesome.
wife
Okay.
spoke. Yes, my wife spoke previously. And
Okay,
also what I would like to ask, besides I'm a co-host, I'm electrical contractor, right? And I'm dealing with the city enough. So my question is, how are you guys planning to determine the permit price? So let's say someone renting a room out and someone renting a mansion out. So are you planning to just kind of give the same price for the permit for everyone? And also, who is going to be issuing licenses for the host? Are you planning to create a board, licensing board, like electrical board, plumbing board, etc.? That's kind of it.
Thank you for your questions. We will add those to our comment portal for response. Thank you for those. Okay. Laura Berry. Laura.
Hello.
Hi.
Just one comment I wanted to make is that I know in other cities, when they've started to do regulations, they have zones. So like in Nashville, Tennessee, for example, you live in a really nice residential neighborhood with single family homes with large yards, and there's bachelor and bachelorette parties that are being really disruptive to the neighborhood. That's completely different than an Airbnb in downtown Nashville. So I'm just wondering if the regulations, I just don't know, I don't believe they should be applied universally. Like the building that I host in Plaza Midwood's like 200 feet long. So when you say they can't be further than 400 feet away, it's like the building's not even that long. So I think that maybe that was created with the thought of single family homes. I'm not sure. And I can certainly understand how a neighborhood in Nashville that's a residential neighborhood where they have children and there's all these people partying all the time is a problem, but you kind of expect it in more of a downtown area. So I just wanted to bring that up, that zones within Charlotte should be considered.
Thank you, Laura. Okay. One final call for anyone who'd like to speak, and place your name in the chat before we move on. We've gotten through everyone who had requested to speak. Okay. So Kevin, I will throw it back over to you to wrap us up.
Great. Thanks, Yolanda. Oop. I said I was muted, but I think I'm not muted. Can you all hear me?
Yep, we can
Okay,
hear you.
Sorry. Thanks for that, Yolanda. I appreciate it. And I just want to reiterate, we very much as a UDO team appreciate everybody being here this evening and speaking passionately with us about your perspectives and your through your lens and giving us the suggestions and feedback that you have. I interjected earlier when Yolanda was clarifying some things with regard to the online portal and posting your comments or questions. And so when I interjected, I said we'd have a little bit more guidance for you. And so that kind of leads us, it's a good segue into the slide that you see in front of you now. And so speaking of the UDO public comment portal, you can access that either through the Charlotte UDO website, which is www.charlotteudo.org, or via that direct link that Mariah and maybe other staff had shared directly in the chat box earlier. This does not conclude our engagement or our solicitation of public feedback and comments and suggestions. As we talked about in the schedule earlier, we are currently in our public engagement and feedback phase that will continue through March 18th. Comments are submitted by topic, and I want to just take a moment's pause here to give a little bit more guidance and actually a shout out to one of our attendees tonight, Christy S. Christy was right there with it and figuring out how best to post comments to the portal. And if you see here on this screen, kind of at the lower right quadrant, you'll see about 4 sections: ordinance, introduction, zoning districts and standards, stormwater, and subdivision, streets and infrastructure. Once you get to the online public comment portal, you want to select that zoning districts and standards section. And that's where you're going to submit your comments and your questions following up on this evening's listening session. And Christy was very good about posting that guidance in the chat box. Specifically, once you get in there, you want to click on post comment. It asks you to where you want to post your comment. You want to do that through selecting uses and development. You want to click post comment. Once you get there, they're going to ask you for your contact information. And then once you get through to the point where you can input your questionnaire comment, you want to be sure that you've selected the drop-down box for section 15.3 prescribed conditions. That really is going to really point your comments, point your questions into the right direction based on your feedback on these proposed standards. So thank you, Christy, for kind of leading everybody at tonight's session down that right path. In addition to that, the procedure is pretty similar for any other section of the UDO that you might want to present feedback on. So it's not necessarily limited to the topic of short-term rentals in this evening's topic. If you've got other areas of the UDO that you've concerns with, or then you'd like to post comments or questions about, you can select one of the other sections and basically go through the same process for whatever section that you want to provide those comments on. And we also recognize that this can be somewhat of a challenge. So there is a video tutorial available at the Charlotte UDO website that will also help walk you through on how to best post your comments and questions through our online public comment portal. So this was touched on a little bit at the outset, I think probably from other staff. Tonight we're discussing short-term rentals, but our Thursdays with UDO virtual listening sessions will continue over the course of the next couple of weeks. Coming up next week, we're going to be focusing on the proposed standards for neighborhood 1 zoning districts. And then in 2 weeks' time, we're going to be focusing on the proposed off-street parking requirements in the first draft of the UDO. Each session, like tonight's listening session, will offer 2 opportunities, an afternoon and a late afternoon / early evening offering. And you'd register if you've got interest in attending either or both of those. You've got the opportunity to register for those just the same as you did for tonight's listening session by going to our website and going through that process to register for that meeting. And to Crystal's point, others that have expressed this concern, all the meeting recording slides, chat transcripts will be posted on the UDO website. We do ask just for a little bit of patience though, because sometimes it does take us some time as a relatively small team to try to get all of that information compiled, cleaned up, and posted up there for your benefit. And I think, yep, that is it for me. So with that, I will turn it back over to Yolanda to further close us out.
Thank you, Kevin. I do see that we do have one person, Megan, who says she was unable to come off of mute. Megan, we will capture your comment, but if you would like to speak, we don't, in all fairness, we'd like to allow you the opportunity to share that vocally if you'd like. We'll try to send you, Megan Hirth, we'll try to send you a request to unmute. You could try that once again.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can hear you now. You have 1 minute and 30 seconds. I'm glad you can unmute. Absolutely.
Thank you, Yolanda. Yes, I appreciate the opportunity to speak. You know, I'm a nurse. I'm a Charlottean. I work for Atrium. I love Charlotte. And we've been blessed to have our Airbnb now for a few years. And it has enabled me to be home with my kids. It's an income stream that is just absolutely valuable to our home. And, you know, I just want to say, I know you guys are talking about grandfathering people, which is great for me, but I don't think it's right to strip people who are moving to the area who, like me, need that extra income stream and have, you know, a great grasp of handling our personal property well and making sure to maintain excellent standards with the guests that we host. We've never had any difficulties. If we had even the slightest, Airbnb handled it firmly for us. So I just don't think the city really has the expertise or the insight or really the right to infringe on our personal property and what activities we are hosting there. Now, obviously, if there's a party or a public disturbance, then sure, those rare events bring in the police. You know, I don't think a very broad-reaching rule set like you guys are promoting here is going to help. I think it's going to hurt a lot of middle to low-class people like me that are trying to just make ends meet, like somebody mentioned before. And really, it is a blessing to people that we bring in. I love how Airbnb says
Megan,
no.
I'm going to stop you for just 1 second, just because I'm going to try to keep this in fairness. Yeah. You did meet your minute and 30 seconds. However, I'm going to give you an additional minute and 30 seconds so you can go ahead and finish your thought.
Yeah.
Just going to reset the timer.
All right. Yeah. And so I just want to say Airbnb is a great company. I love their anti-discrimination rules that they put in place. And so it's really all are welcome. And I feel that in my own home with Airbnb. I know that's important to Charlotte as well. I just think it would be a win for all of us to keep the freedom going with how we treat our personal property and our personal businesses. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Additionally, it looks like we do have Jamie and Fazan. Can you unmute? Jamie, you should be receiving a request from the meeting host to unmute.
Hi, this is Jamie. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you now. You have 1 minute and 30 seconds.
Thank you. I'm a native of Charlotte, real estate for about 22 years now, and I have a number of short-term rentals. This has afforded me to go to other states. We even have some down in Florida, and you can tell the Orlando is actually opening back up short-term rentals. They lost a lot of money by banning it, and the revenue went to Kissimmee and to Davenport. So, I wasn't here for the entire meeting, and I apologize for being a little late here, but they realized that it was, having the restrictions was a major penalty to their city. And now July 1st, Orlando's opening back up, and they have something to where you can pay a fee and be registered. And that just seems to be probably the best way that they're going to move forward. How do you guys feel about that type of thing? Or does anybody have any comments about, the lost revenue? And then secondly, when you're dealing with somebody like Tepper that's trying to buy, build a stadium over here at that Charlotte Pipe Foundry for something like the Super Bowl, yet the last study I saw that Charlotte had was about 11,000 rooms short for a Super Bowl. So we were never in contention. The only thing that makes up for that is short-term rentals. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie.
How do I go back to those messages?
Okay. Again, in all fairness, we want to be sure that we have gotten everyone who wanted to speak. We definitely want to hear your feedback. Okay, looks like we have gotten everyone. Awesome. Well, thank you all again for your attendance. That concludes our meeting. And as Kevin said, we definitely would love to have you in subsequent meetings and additional meetings that we'll have in the coming weeks. Have a good evening.